Good morning, everybody. John here at Havoc Maker Studio, and I've already did a kind of the review-ish of the Marvel Multiverse role-playing game the other day. We did a live Q&A. Had some technical difficulties with getting with the internet, just dropped and dropped and dropped. We got it fixed, but already we lost about 30 minutes of airtime. So once again, I apologize for that. But today I want to just kind of give my follow-up impression. I'm going to kind of go through grading some of this stuff, but I wanted to also do a video so you don't have to watch that whole almost 2-hour video just to see the highlights. And instead of me going in and breaking up in certain segments, I'm going to do a series of about 3 videos here that'll just kind of give a nice Barney basic breakdown of certain aspects of it and how I'm going to grade it. Now, a future video will have the grading system. In fact, I'm going to do a second review of the Symborum RPG after I've played it for about 2 years now, on and off, and then my impression of the Symborum 5e conversion that the Free League Publishing did they had sent me copies for review. So I'm going to do Symborum and use that as my litmus test, I guess. That is going to be my gold standard for comparing other games such as D&D, 5th edition, Pathfinder 2.0 and such. So actually, let's just get right into this right now. So first up, I want to talk about the ability checks or the action checks. This is what some people are really curious about. I think most of everything else, and is one of the aspects that was slightly confusing to read. I'm going to be honest, the playtest book needs some work, but it is a playtest book, and I think I see what the problem is with it. They did a cut and paste of what they thought the most important content was into this smaller version of the book, and there's some issues with the flow of the book. But once you get past that, it starts to make sense. So first, let's take a look at the action check or their D616 system. So you're going to roll 3d6. You do need to do 2 dice of one color and 1 dice of another color, or at the very least, if you have 3 different colors, just nominate one of those dice as your Marvel dice. That is very critical. It's very important. And have it set at the beginning. I don't care if you have to have a piece of paper so in front of you that says, hey, my blue and purple swirly dice, that is my Marvel dice. Doesn't matter. Just have one of those dice that looks different from the others. That's the most important thing. Then anyway, so you're going to roll those dice together. You're going to add that total of the dice, which is going to be a number from 3 to 18. And you're going to add any of your action modifiers. We'll get into that much later. And then you compare that total versus the TN or your target number to determine if you're successful or not. That is in itself fairly simple, but it does get more complicated. Now, let's talk about critical failures and critical successes, like if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e or Pathfinder, or even games like any of the 2d20 systems from Multiverse, rolling a 1. Well, in Multiverse, rolling 1s is really good. You want to roll low. You don't want to roll high. But in, say, D&D 5th edition or Pathfinder, if you roll a 20 on the dice, that is a critical success. A 1 on the dice is a critical failure. And unless you have some sort of re-roll that lets you re-roll that critical failure, then you're stuck with it. You usually don't want to re-roll a critical success. And there could be, though, reasons for you to do that, but probably very rare. So in the Marvel Multiverse RPG, you've got the 3 different rolls you're looking for. You have the fantastic result, which is rolling a 1 on the Marvel dice. This is a very cool thing to do. You want to roll that 1 on the Marvel dice and not roll double 1s on the other 2 dice. So if you manage to get a fantastic result, then that 1 counts as a 6 when you add up your total. I know it's weird, but whatever. it's a silly thing. A 6 is still a 6. Yes, it doesn't negate it, but if you roll a 1, that does count as a 6. And with it being a fantastic result, There are a lot of situations, especially when it comes to powers, or probably like skill check or attribute checks to determine if you can find something, or maybe you can over here get some key pieces of information. A fantastic result gets you extra. I know there's a lot of powers that if you get a fantastic result, you will do double damage with that power, which is really cool. Now, the ultimate fantastic result is rolling a 6 and another 6 on your main dice and then a 1 on the Marvel dice. That does count as an 18. Remember that Marvel dice, if it's a 1, that becomes a 6. So this is the ultimate result. This means that you not only automatically succeed, you also get any benefits from the fantastic result, right? And if there's any troubles, which we'll talk about again here or shortly, those are negated for this purposes. This is the critical of critical roles. This is a very good thing to get. You want this all the time. All right. Now we have our botched results. And now this is where you have a 1 on every dice. And in this case, the Marvel dice being a 1 stays as a 1. It is not counted as a 6. This is the one time it is not counted as a 6, except when you're rolling damage dice, but we're not worried about that. But when you're doing action checks, this is a bad roll. This means something really bad happened. This is your critical failure. So don't roll that. All right, so moving on to the, just kind of going still on the action check rolling here, we have two other things I want to talk about, really three. We have our edges. Now, edges are basically, this is advantage for those of you that are familiar with D&D 5e and Pathfinder. If you have advantage, that means you usually get to roll an extra 20 side d20 and take the favorable of the results. In this case, what it allows you to do is re-roll any one of your dice to get a better result. Usually you want that, let's, for an example, let's say I had, I probably should have did a better graphic there, but do 5 and a 4 on my regular dice, and I had a 2 on my Marvel dice. Well, I'm going to re-roll my 2 because if I get a 1, then I get a fantastic result and it becomes a 6. And if I roll anything higher than a 2, so 3, 4, 5, or 6, it's already a better roll. So it always comes down to re-rolling one of your dice to get that better result. So, let's say I got my 3 1s, that botched roll, but I have an edge. Well, I'm going to keep that 1 on my Marvel dice, and I'm just going to re-roll one of my others because that 1 becomes it'll still be a fantastic result as long as I don't roll another 1 and get to add all that on there, and it becomes a lot better. So it comes down to determining which one you think you need to re-roll. Does that make sense? I hope so. Now, troubles is disadvantage. A trouble is if you're affected by a trouble, that means the GM tells you which of your dice to re-roll. So if you got that 1 on your Marvel dice, he'll be like, I want you to re-roll that. Or maybe you have 2 1s already and maybe a 6 on your regular dice. So re-roll that for that chance to get a botched result. I hope that makes sense. So now here's the thing with edges and troubles. You can have multiple edges and multiple troubles. They do stack. And let's say you have 3 edges versus 3 troubles, or 2 troubles. You subtract them, you have 1 edge left over. It works just like that. Troubles and edges will cancel each other out, and whatever's left over is what you use, if anything. Also, if you have multiple edges or multiple troubles, you can re-roll a re-roll. Normally, in most 90% of the games out there, probably more than 90%, you're not allowed to re-roll a re-roll. But in the Marvel Multiverse, their D616 system, you can re-roll a re-roll. Yep, it can happen. I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's kind of a cool mechanic, but I'm not too sure about that. Okay, so target number. So this is, most people kind of get an idea of target number. This is usually, hey, what's the difficulty? What's the challenge rating? What do I need to roll on the dice to be successful? And that's what the target number is. Now, the base target number is determined by your overall, or I think let me walk that back, the average of the character ranks. But let's just say everybody is rank 1 and for this purposes. So your challenge rating is a 15. That means that when you come down to, or when it comes time to roll an action check that's not against another character, let's say you're trying to find the secret passage, yay, and the difficulty is a straight whatever the challenge rating is. So for rank 1, you need a 15 on your vigilance attribute to find it. Okay, so you're going to roll your 3d6, add in your regular character modifiers, and hopefully you get a 15 or higher. If you don't, then you fail. Now that goes up by 1 for every rank, starting at 15, then the 16 at rank 2, all the way up to, I think it's 31 at rank 25. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it is. Now, this is the base set challenge rating for everything. All right. So means there are 0 modifiers for this. This is the gold standard that you're rolling against for anything that's not doing an action against another character. So there are other modifiers to make it easier. Maybe it's a more trivial task like, hey guys, you're trying to find that secret passage. Where could it be? I wonder if it's with all the smoke and lights coming out from the cracks behind the door or the bookshelf. You know, that possibly could be it. That might be a -7 trivial roll, and so you'll subtract. If it's basically if it's beneficial, you subtract from the target number. So trivial would make a 15. That would make that an 8. Very easy to do. You probably do that just with your modifiers. Now, the most ridiculous stuff would be a +7. So you add that onto your target number, making it in this case, rank 1, the challenge rating of 15 becomes a 22. Probably very extremely unlikely, with the exception of rolling the ultimate fantastic result, which is the 616 on the dice, which would mean you would have an automatic success. That's the only really way to get past a ridiculous when you don't have enough modifiers and your dice roll to achieve it. So I do like this aspect. I think this is, having the challenge ratings kind of rank up for this system. I think this is ideal. Makes things a little easier in this regards. Now, this is probably the only thing I do like about the challenge rating. So let's take a look at combat now. So combat, there's a ton of other factors we have to take into. I'm not going to include in this episode. We're not going to do a full breakdown of combat, like movement, how many actions you can take, terrain, obstacles, or cover. We're definitely not going to cover all the different status effects and such. I just want to focus on some very core mechanics that I've read people have a lot of questions on different forums. So let's take a look. Combat. There are basically 2 types of combat, and now there can be some variations in some of these ability modifiers, but we'll get into that later. So melee is your might attribute modifier plus your 3d6 versus your opponent's agility defense. I'll show an example of this a little later. And if you meet or exceed that defense number, which becomes basically your target number, then you will have successfully hit them and you follow through with damage and whatnot. Range attacks. This is the agility modifier, just like the might modifier, added to your dice roll versus an agility defense. Now, one thing I need to point out about this, that there are some power sets, which will be in another, I think the next episode or next video, which will cover some of those power sets where you can swap out, say, instead of agility, you can have ego as your primary attack power. That is something like maybe I think logic was another one where you could swap out logic for agility. So, and I think that might only be for like say melee combat or energy blast attacks, that sort of thing. And at that point, maybe you've got a really super smart investigative character. You know, I know Bruce Wayne is not Marvel, but you got a Bruce Wayne style character that's a great detective, and so he can now swap out his logic or his agility for attack modifiers for his logic. That makes sense? I hope so. I hope so. I'm stumbling through here. Keep up, guys. Keep up. All right. So moving on, let's talk about damage, because damage is not as bad as I thought. Some parts of this I like, some parts I'm not too sure on. So once you've determined if you've successfully hit or not, you're going to roll your 3d6. You're going to add the total of that dice roll to your damage modifiers. Now, there are technically right now two types of modifiers. There's one that you will have as you rank up. You'll eventually get modifiers onto your attack rolls because you're always rolling 3d6. But the more powerful your character is, and you'll see that in a second, is they get bonuses, natural bonuses to their attack. And then you get to add in your ability, your attribute modifier. So like your might modifier, your agility modifier, whatever, you get to add that on as well. So you end up with 3d6 plus a number plus another number, depending on the attack. And that determines how much damage you guys do. Now some people, some characters, maybe some terrain, something, they have damage reduction. You'll have to double check because they might have damage reduction only against attacks that affect or target agility. So like Captain America with his shield, he gets 40 damage reduction against attacks that basically they're physical attacks that go against his agility defense. Now, if they were against his mental or his mind, that might be against his ego, and his shield is not going to reduce that damage. So once you figure out what you're going to subtract your total damage from that damage reduction to give you your new total damage. Now you subtract that from their health or their focus, and they end up with their new result. Now, if you reach 0 health, you're unconscious. You are knocked out until somebody comes up and revives you. It looks like there are some powers that can get people to snap out of it or wake up. If you have 0 focus, then you are demoralized. And there's several ways that you could lose focus. There's some attacks that actually do damage to your focus. And also there are sometimes some of your big superpowers will cost focus to use. And if you use that focus and keep using it over and over again, you're going to end up being demoralized. So that's not good. That's basically like being unconscious. Death is possible. Now, it's very difficult, at least in one fell swoop. I don't see it happening all too often, but you have to have enough damage to basically twice your health in damage. So if you have 80 hit points or 80 health, you have to go to negative 80 health to die. And of course, just like Marvel comic books and movies, death is not necessarily the ending. But at the very least, you might want to get ready to make a new character, depending on what you and your GM want to work out. Or narrator. So Shattered, it's like death, but it is, instead of negative damage equal to your health, it's negative damage equal to your focus. This means your mind is just shattered. You are a shell of a person. You're going to get submitted into a psychiatric ward or something like that until something happens to repair your brain. But they say basically when this happens, just like death, your character is removed from play. So make a new character. Hopefully you have a sidekick or something else in mind. So there is that chance that you could be permadeath or having your character basically become an NPC and you'll have to make a new one. I think it's going to be rare, but it is possible. So let's, now this is just going to be a slight dabble because I've talked about modifiers and stuff. We're just going to briefly cover some of the Marvel attributes. So Marvel, it all spells out, and I talked about this in the other video. We have might, agility, resilience, vigilance, ego, and logic. Might, I think, is pretty explanatory. This is your physical strength and such. Now, this is key for adding to your close combat hit modifier, and it adds whatever your attribute is, adds to your melee damage. Agility, just like might, well, agility is, well, your acrobatic abilities, your manual dexterity, that sort of thing. This adds to your range hit modifier, and it adds to your range damage. Resilience, this is your physical toughness, your stamina, that sort of thing. This adds to your health. Vigilance is your mental awareness, be able to notice things and whatnot. This adds to your focus, your total focus. Ego and logic currently, as far as I can see, do not add to any of those, but they are still important because they have their own defenses and they have their own place because there are no skills in this game, guys and gals. So, logic skills would be like your ability to investigate, maybe solve puzzles, riddles, that sort of thing. Ego is also your personality. So I know we're seeing a lot of action checks for combat, but this is still a role-playing game. There's going to be times where something like your ego is going to be required to talk your way out of something or to resist something. So every single one of these have some significance. Some lend themselves to combat, others do not. And in this case, right now, ego and logic don't fit that role. So just be aware. Don't use them as a throwaway skill like charisma. All right, so here is the Marvel attributes. Take a look at this. So this is just the first 6 ranks. There are 25 ranks. I think this is the genius archetype, and I think it's the most balanced out of them all. And so let's just take a look at this because this is another one of the confusing parts that I think a lot of people had. So when we take a look at, we're just going to look at rank 1, that first line there. And under the might category, you see 2 values. You have a plus number value and then a straight fixed number. In this case, it's a +2 and a 13. That first number, that is your action modifier for that rank. So you're going to take, in this case, +2 for might. You're going to add it to whatever your might attribute is, whether you have a might attribute of -4 all the way up to whatever your max is. And your max is always determined by what your archetype is. I think, like in the case of the genius, I think logic and ego are the top ones, which always means that you always have a higher cap, which is usually +1 and increases as you level up or you rank up. So at least in this case, so your action modifier is +2 plus your attribute. That gives you your total modifier. So if I have a 2 might and I'm rank 1, I now add my 2 might to my modifier, which is a +2. So any actions requiring me to use might, I'm now at +4 to my dice rolls. That second number is your defense value. So any attacks that affect your might, you look at your defense. In this case, it's a 13. And since I already mentioned I have a +2 might, I add that onto that number right there to give me my total defense of a 15 in might. I hope this is making sense. Now we go all the way over. We get past that, just past logic. We look at our fight damage and our range damage. And you can see that those numbers are fixed as you go up. So 1d6, then eventually 2, then you get your 3s, and then 3d6 plus 4. That's when you start getting your modifiers around rank 5. So you will still add in your modifier for whatever attribute that is. So fight damage, on average, is going to be including your might. Range damage is going to be including your agility. So in the case of might, we know that I have a 2. I have a 2 in my might, and I'm going to be a 1d6 plus 2 to start out with. And let's say I never change my might. At rank 5, I'm 3d6 plus 4. That's the standard, plus my might attribute, which I've never changed, so it's a 2. So 3d6 plus 4 plus 2. And just so you guys have an idea, the average human being is a 0 in their attribute. That's the average. So as you start going above that, you start becoming amateur athletic, professional athletic, whatever. And then, okay, so let's take a look at health and focus. Now these ones, health, that's your health total. It's how many hit points you basically have. For those that are familiar with hit points, you will add your resilience attribute to this to give you a higher total. I only put a 1 in mine, so I'm going to start off with 7 health. And then my focus, I've got a 2 in my focus or my vigilance for some reason. And now my vigilance or my focus becomes a 8. So now I might not have a lot of health, but I've got a lot of focus to use my other powers. So that is pretty much how you read that Marvel attributes. What do you call it? That chart. So, okay, so moving on. So I did a combat test. They have a couple characters in here, and I wanted to just do some basic rolls. So I did a total of really 30 rolls, but I played through, even though a couple of them were the fights were KOs before I got to 10 dice. So Captain America and Black Panther both ranked 15. So the first match, I managed to go 8 rounds before we had a KO. So it took about 24 minutes to do 8 rounds, and this is me by myself rolling 2 sets of dice, adding those numbers, comparing them, and then rolling the damage dice. So I'm not too sure how I like this. This is starting to look a little slow. So Black Panther had 0 misses in this round, believe it or not. Captain America was very abysmal with 8 misses. Both of them had 2 fantastic rolls each, so total of 4 fantastic rolls during these total of 10 rounds. There were no ultimate fantastic rolls. Black Panther eventually won on round 8, dealing damage, and that's mainly. Now, this is not without using any of their powers or have any edges or anything else. This is straight numbers based on these particular fight values. Then the second match was 7 rounds for the KO. This took about 26 minutes, so about the average time. Black Panther had 4 misses. Captain America had 6. We had 2 fantastic rolls each. That seems to be a very high thing. Captain America had an ultimate fantastic roll, and eventually he beats out Black Panther. Now the third match, 11 rounds for the KO. So it went over my 10 rounds. It was 31 minutes. I got a little faster, even though still over those rounds, but it's still a little bit faster as I kind of picked up the pace here. 5 misses for Black Panther, 7 misses for Captain America, 1 fantastic roll each, no ultimate fantastic rolls, and then the Black Panther had the victory. So looking at everything, in total there were 31 dice rolls, right? So only 1 ultimate fantastic roll. I don't know if that's the norm. I'm not even going to try to figure out the math behind that. The fantastic rolls seem to happen a lot more frequently. So I think that's something to take into account. There were a number of times that if I would have had an edge, I could have turned a dice roll into an ultimate fantastic. And there is at least one time, and that was only one time, I had that possibility happen. And only one time for a botched roll, if I had a trouble, I could have turned it into a botched roll. So I don't think the ultimate fantastic rolls probably happen that often. Definitely need more gameplay to go on here. So what do I think so far? Well, the combat I think is, and all these things kind of play into each other. I gave it a C across the board right now. I'll give you guys a rating, a different rating, like for a different game a little later on, probably like D&D or something. But right now, my second impression of this, and actually doing a quote playthrough with dice, was not favorable. Combat is takes a little bit longer than it should, and I think there is, yeah, you got to be very careful. In my initial impression, very careful when you are having different ranks face off against different ranks. In this case, we had two rank 15s facing each other in my little demo, and it took longer. Be aware that combat is probably going to be, my new reassessment, probably about the same amount of time as Dungeons and Dragons 5e, which is not good, in my personal opinion. It should go by way faster. But you're bogged down with the attributes, which is also includes the modifiers. These ridiculously high modifiers. It's bad optics. This is really, and I'm not sure if this is the correct term, but I feel like this is regressive. This is an old school look at playing or having an RPG. I think and I'm going to hit more on this a little later. Actually, we'll wait until this. Let's get through this. So, difficulty ranks, I put it a C because it all ties in together. I kind of like the idea of hey, whatever your level is, here's the basic difficulty rating. So I think that's a good chart to have in, like, say, for the game master section, to go, hey guys, if your characters are, I don't know, in this case, ranks or levels, or they've spent this much experience, like, hey, if you've spent 250 experience points leveling up your characters, this is the challenge rating that you should be looking at. So I'm keeping it simple there, but it came down because it's all tied into this system. So right now, my impression is not good. I'm keeping it in between. I'm gonna do a little bit more playing. Actually, we're gonna sit down with a couple other guys this weekend, and we're gonna go back and forth. Somebody else is gonna play a character. Another person's gonna play a character. I'm gonna be narrator, and we're going to do some combat using all the powers, all the abilities, and we're going to see what the numbers show. And mind you, this is still one game with only a couple people in one small area of the world. Everybody else is going to have lots of other results. But to get my impression, do I want to buy this game? Do I want to invest in it and run it? That's what I want to get these numbers down. Right now, not looking too good, because this kind of I don't want to say archaic, but this old school ladder system of, progressive, like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going all the way up or down, however you want to look at it. I think it's dated. I think that especially when you are getting more, I mean, I think as you level up, you should get more powerful, but getting more hit points and more damage, be able to do more damage just by ranking up. It's like you're not putting any work into it. Other games that are more of a linear progression system, like Symborum, where if you want to have more hit points, more wounds, be able to take more damage, you have to take your experience and you have to sacrifice something to get that increase in hit points. So if I had to make a decision, do I want to improve my close combat ability, say with my sword and shield technique, or do I want to get some more hit points, or do I want to pick up those lore abilities or lore skills, so we can solve some of these ancient mysteries? Now I've got to look at that, and I think that would have been better served, at least initially, with this multiverse role playing game, because characters just don't magically just all of a sudden become more powerful. You have to think about, like, say, Peter Parker, is he, or not even Peter Parker, let's just say just average Joe superhero. I just got some new powers. I got to learn how to use my powers, right? And as I use my powers more and more and I experiment with them, I get more experience, basically, and they get more better. They get more better. But if I'm concentrating so much on that, I'm neglecting schoolwork. I'm neglecting work. I'm neglecting working on my own physical health and such. So if I want to train physically and like pick up some martial arts, so I get some hand-to-hand skills to fall back on, or just train physically to be stronger or more agile, more more stamina, whatnot. I'm now have to sacrifice some of that training time with my powers with some physical stuff, and I need to also work on my brain because I want to be a crime scene investigator. So how am I going to balance all this? That's where those experience points come in. A lot of those linear systems, like you earn character points or experience points, and you spend them on upgrades for your character to improve your character, not just get them because you're leveling. This and like D&D and Pathfinder. It's the reason why I'm not a big fan of those games, because you are always you're getting something for nothing. There's really not a lot of progression there. It's more like a video game. And I think that's what my problem is right now. This is just playing a video game. Now, in kind of a psychological standpoint, if I was a new player, which this is definitely not a game for beginners. I'm sorry, right now, they say that this is a game great for beginners. BS. This is not a game for beginners. If you want a great game for beginners, go play any of the Monty Cook games, like Numenera or Skyward Bound or whatever it's called. Their superhero game, because you only need a D20 and it is very easy to play. That is a beginner's game, and in fact it's got more complexities. That the more you get into it, the more basically you mature as a gamer, and games becomes very in depth. And I would not say D&D is a beginner's game necessarily, but it is the most mainstream a beginner game. This is definitely not. Right now I would buy this on a whimsy, but I want to go through character creation with you guys. I want to go through the powers and the traits, and let's see if I have a second assessment. Maybe you guys have a second assessment. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about this. How do you guys feel about the ladder progression? Is it kind of an old dated system? Should we be looking at another way of leveling our characters or improving our characters? Is this just tired and played out? I remember, and I know this is a bad example, but like Kirito, the main protagonist in Sword Art Online, he talks about it when he's facing off against, I want to say it's like episode 4 or 5 of the first season, when he's facing off against some player killers. And he just talks about how broken these level systems in RPGs are that are like this, and how it becomes OP that he can sit there and take a whole bunch of damage and heal and everything and shrug it off. And I feel, looking at some of the characters that they've gotten here, like imagine Miles Morales versus Captain Marvel. Man, it is just epically, the scale is it's all sorts of wrong. But I'm still going to give it 100% look through on a second time. That's what we're doing right now, because I want to give it a chance. I feel like there's some potential there, but I'm leaning towards this is a game I might buy on a whimsy or just to have on the shelf. All right. Anyways, you guys have yourself a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Sorry for the long video. I hope it was helpful. Let me know in the comments below. If you didn't like the video, go ahead and hit the dislike and leave a comment and tell me what I should do better or different. All right. Anyways, you guys have yourself a wonderful day, and I'll chat with you later.